Some UFC fighters eat 8,000 calories a day after fights, balloon up by 50 pounds between bouts, binge drink on vacation, and then somehow step into the octagon looking like world-class athletes. From Paddy Pimblett's food addiction confessions to Tai Tuivasa accepting fights while drunk, the gap between fight-ready and off-season chaos in the UFC is something else. So let's get into 10 fighters who've pushed the boundaries of what an unhealthy lifestyle looks like while competing at the highest level of combat sports. Paddy Pimblett, the poster child of binge eating, a lightweight fighter who balloons past 200 pounds between fights and calls himself a food addict on national podcasts. That's where this story starts. UFC lightweight Paddy Pimblett has been accused of ballooning up between fights and has even been dubbed Fatty Paddy by fans. And the thing is, he's never denied it. In fact, he's leaned into it. The Liverpool-born fighter has turned his weight fluctuations into content, posting YouTube videos with titles like "I got fat again" and dropping 50 lbs for UFC 282. Pimblett has previously spoken about consuming more than 10,000 calories per day after fights, and has even suggested he might be dealing with an eating disorder, following claims that he once reached over 210 pounds in between camps. Now, to understand why Pimblett has become the most talked about case of unhealthy lifestyle habits in the UFC, you have to understand what happens to his body between fight announcements. When Pimblett is in camp, he works with a personal nutritionist called the macro chef Joel McCarthy, and his daily intake drops to around 1,900 calories of clean, protein-packed meals. But outside of camp, he goes from eating 1,500 or 2,000 calories a day to eating 8,000 a day. That kind of swing is staggering for any human body, let alone an elite athlete operating in one of the most competitive divisions in mixed martial arts. The numbers paint a vivid picture. Pimblett has admitted that he's only ever at the 155-pound lightweight limit for about an hour or two, and he gets into the cage at around 87 kilograms, roughly 192 pounds. That's a 37-pound difference between weigh-in and fight night. But what happens after the fight is where the real chaos lives. After his January 2026 fight, Pimblett took to YouTube, where he was eating at different restaurants across his native Liverpool, still sporting 2 black eyes, and told viewers he was already back up to 190 pounds, approximately 35 pounds heavier than his weigh-in just weeks earlier. Pimblett has been remarkably open about what's driving these habits. In a conversation on Steve-O's Wild Ride podcast, he laid it all out. He said he genuinely thinks he's a food addict, and that he's got a bit of an eating disorder because of MMA, specifically the weight cuts and dieting, and that people who go eat with him are visibly shocked at how much he can eat. He even traced the progression of his compulsive behaviors over the years, from partying to gambling to food being the thing that consumed him most. Fellow fighters haven't been quiet about it either. Sean O'Malley believes Paddy Pimblett could develop an eating disorder due to his binging habits. On the Joe Rogan Experience, O'Malley described how strict dieting in the weeks before a fight creates this psychological rubber band effect, where the moment the pressure lifts, the eating becomes almost uncontrollable. And Renato Moicano has said that every time they see Paddy Pimblett after a fight, he becomes obese, and he thinks that's going to be very detrimental for his career. Moicano has even gone as far as saying Pimblett is not only jeopardizing his career, but also his life whenever he decides to retire. From a coaching standpoint, the pattern is genuinely concerning. Seeing a 155-pound fighter balloon up by 40 pounds between bouts isn't ideal. The constant yo-yo between weights puts a strain on the body and requires extraordinary effort to bring the weight down weeks leading to a fight. And the health ramifications extend beyond cardio and performance. Pimblett himself revealed that before joining the UFC, he nearly suffered kidney failure when fighting at featherweight. His weight cut was so bad that when a doctor saw his DEXA scan results, he said he wouldn't have let Pimblett fight. Despite all the criticism, scrutiny, and health warnings, there's one statistic that continues to confound everyone. Pimblett has never missed weight throughout his 14-year career. And that's perhaps the most paradoxical element of this entire story. He treats his body like a yo-yo between camps, pushes caloric extremes that would leave most people hospitalized, and then somehow makes the scale every single time. But as Moicano and many others have warned, the bill always comes due eventually. Arman Tsarukian, from chef-prepared meals to I Eat Everything, a top lightweight contender with a personal chef during camp, and a complete dietary meltdown the moment the fight ends. Arman Tsarukian's relationship with food outside of the octagon tells a familiar but dangerous story. During a candid chat with Clavicular, Tsarukian said that when he is in fight camp, he has a chef who who can help him keep his diet in check. However, when not in camp, Tsarukian loves to binge eat. He didn't mince words about what that looks like. When he's not in camp or on a diet, he eats what he wants. Burgers, steaks, BBQ, fried chicken, sushi. He described it simply as eating everything. During camp, the discipline is clinical. Breakfast usually consists of eggs or yogurt with granola. Lunch is often pasta for energy, and dinner revolves around fish or meat paired with vegetables. A routine built for recovery, endurance, and making weight without unnecessary stress. His nutritionist, Matteo Capodalio, has even incorporated Armenian honey, mixed with NSF whey protein, dark chocolate, and yogurt, into a breakfast performance bowl designed to fuel training and aid recovery. The precision is remarkable, but the moment the cage door closes and the final horn sounds, that precision evaporates completely. The extreme discipline required during camp often leads to a complete release afterward, both mentally and physically. And for Tsarukian, that post-fight indulgence isn't just about food. It's a reward after weeks of restriction and sacrifice. The weight numbers tell the real story. Tsarukian has revealed that he hits 190 pounds as his heaviest off-season weight, and despite fighting at 155, he has expressed a desire to move down to featherweight, to fight Alexander Volkanovski. That ambition has drawn sharp criticism. Former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman has called the potential move to featherweight ridiculous, due to Tsarukian's previous weight struggles. And then there's the UFC 311 situation that added another layer to Tsarukian's weight management concerns. Dana White said the 29-year-old didn't make weight for his fight at UFC 311. Tsarukian himself seemed to confirm that his pullout was due to missing weight, in a video with his nutritionist, joking that this time the nutrition plan worked 100%, and they didn't miss weight like last time. For a fighter competing in one of the most stacked divisions in the sport, those kinds of admissions carry tremendous weight. Pun intended. Tsarukian's weight issues at 155 pounds are well documented. His last weight cut ahead of the fight against Dan Hooker was grueling, with videos showing fellow UFC fighter Khamzat Chimaev supporting him through a brutal cut. When a grown man needs another fighter to physically support him through the process of making weight, the conversation about off-season eating habits stops being casual. It becomes a question about sustainable career longevity and long-term health. Tai Tuivasa. Showies, parties, and 40-pound cuts at heavyweight. A heavyweight fighter who has to cut 40 pounds just to make the 265-pound limit. Think about that for a moment. At heavyweight, where other fighters walk around comfortably at or near the limit, Tai Tuivasa has been on a different program entirely. Tuivasa's trainer revealed that Tai had to lose 18 kilograms, about 40 pounds, in a 14-week training camp once, just to make the heavyweight 265-pound limit. That means outside of camp, Bam Bam was walking around well over 300 pounds. For context, most heavyweight fighters don't cut significant weight. The division was designed so that bigger men could compete without the dangerous weight-cutting practices that plague lighter weight classes. Yet somehow, Tuivasa turned heavyweight into a weight-cutting division for himself. The Australian's lifestyle outside the cage has been no secret. He's built an entire brand around drinking beer from shoes, the now legendary shoey celebration that he performs after every victory. The partying isn't just a post-fight ritual, it bleeds into his off-season. Tuivasa himself admitted that when he was offered the fight against Derrick Lewis at UFC 271, he was drunk and in holiday mode. He accepted a co-main event fight on a major pay-per-view card while intoxicated. That tells you everything about the lifestyle balance, or imbalance, that Tuivasa operates within. The ripple effects of this approach showed in his career trajectory after stringing together a spectacular 5-fight knockout streak that made him one of the most exciting fighters on the roster. Tuivasa's career took a nosedive. He lost 4 consecutive fights, with his conditioning and gas tank frequently questioned by analysts and fans. When a heavyweight, a division where cardio demands are already lower, is getting tired in fights, the conversation inevitably circles back to training habits and lifestyle choices between bouts. Tuivasa's story isn't just about what he does inside the octagon. It's about what happens in all those months between the bright lights and the walkout music, when the cameras are off, the beers are flowing, and the scale isn't calling. Derrick Lewis swangin' and bangin' on Popeyes. If Tai Tuivasa is the party heavyweight, Derrick Lewis is the fast food heavyweight. Lewis has been characterized as a classic heavyweight, owing to his knockout power and physique. But behind that power lies a man who has been remarkably candid about his less than optimal dietary choices. Lewis has spoken openly about his love for Popeye's chicken, and fans have turned it into an ongoing meme within the MMA community. But it goes deeper than a punchline. Lewis has struggled with his conditioning throughout his career, regularly fading in later rounds, and relying almost exclusively on his knockout power to win fights. His approach to fitness between camps has been a frequent talking point among commentators, with many suggesting that his ceiling was limited not by talent, but by lifestyle. The Houston native holds the record for the most knockouts in UFC heavyweight history, which is a testament to his natural power. Lewis set the record for most knockouts by a heavyweight in UFC history, but power without conditioning only gets a fighter so far. His championship fight against Daniel Cormier at UFC 230 exposed the limitations. Lewis faced Daniel Cormier for the UFC Heavyweight Championship on November 3, 2018 at UFC 2030, and he lost the fight by rear naked choke in the second round. It was a fight where Lewis looked sluggish, underprepared, and unable to impose any kind of game plan. Many pointed to his conditioning, which many believed was a reflection of his lifestyle between fights. Lewis's career is one of the great what-ifs in heavyweight MMA. A man with legitimate one-punch knockout power in both hands, natural toughness, and a chin that can absorb punishment from the hardest hitters on the planet, but whose dietary habits and training approach between fights arguably prevented him from ever truly realizing his full potential. His willingness to joke about eating fast food and his self-deprecating humor made him one of the most beloved characters in the sport, but it also may have cost him a world championship. Conor McGregor, the whiskey lifestyle. Conor McGregor's relationship with an unhealthy lifestyle extends beyond diet and into the broader realm of partying, alcohol, and extended absences from the sport. The man who once embodied laser focus and precision striking at 145 pounds, slowly transformed into someone whose lifestyle outside the cage began to overshadow his accomplishments inside it. After launching his Proper 12 whiskey brand, McGregor was frequently photographed partying, drinking, and living a lifestyle that bore little resemblance to the disciplined fighter who dismantled Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. His physical appearance shifted noticeably during long layoffs from competition. At featherweight, McGregor was a razor-sharp, meticulously dieted athlete. By the time he was competing at welterweight and taking extended breaks, the transformation was stark. The long gaps between fights, years at a time, coincided with high-profile incidents that raised questions about his discipline and lifestyle. McGregor's broken leg from his 2021 fight against Dustin Poirier may still haunt him ahead of his return. The recovery from that injury was marred by images and videos of McGregor partying extensively rather than rehabbing with the same intensity he once brought to training camps. McGregor's situation is a cautionary tale that's less about weight fluctuation and more about what happens when fame, wealth, and a party-driven lifestyle erode the discipline that once made a fighter great. The whiskey wasn't just a business for many observers. It became symbolic of a broader lifestyle shift that has kept McGregor out of the octagon for years at a time, while his contemporaries continued to evolve. Kelvin Gastelum, the Burrito King. If there's one fighter whose career was definitively altered by his inability to manage his diet, it's Kelvin Gastelum. Fans and fighters joked that Kelvin Gastelum kept an extremely disciplined diet of burritos and McDonald's. His commitment to that diet was legendary. Gastelum was a middleweight who initially competed at welterweight and showed flashes of genuine championship potential. His fight against Israel Adesanya for the interim middleweight title at UFC 236 was one of the greatest fights in UFC history, but the story of Gastelum's career is also the story of a man who repeatedly sabotaged himself with his eating habits. Gastelum missed weight multiple times at welterweight, which eventually forced the UFC to move him up to 185 pounds permanently. The issue wasn't that he was naturally a big middleweight. It was that his dietary habits between camps made it physically impossible for him to cut down to 170 pounds safely. Coaches, nutritionists, and the UFC itself had tried to work with him, but the pattern persisted. At middleweight, Gastelum found success. His speed and boxing at 185 were exceptional. But the nagging question always remained, what could Gastelum have achieved if he'd maintained proper dietary discipline? At welterweight, he would have been an absolute nightmare for the entire division, with his hand speed and power giving him natural advantages over fighters his own size. Instead, he found himself fighting larger men at middleweight because he couldn't put down the fast food between camps. It's one of the clearest examples in UFC history of talent being undermined by lifestyle. Johnny Hendricks, from welterweight king to weight-cutting disaster. Johnny Hendricks was the man many believed beat Georges St. Pierre in their welterweight title fight at UFC 167. He eventually won the belt by defeating Robbie Lawler, becoming the UFC welterweight champion. But Hendricks' post-championship career was almost entirely defined by his inability to control his weight between fights. Hendricks was a powerful wrestler with devastating one-punch knockout power. But after winning the title, his lifestyle between fights became a chronic problem. He missed weight for back-to-back fights and was eventually forced to move up to middleweight, where his natural advantages evaporated entirely. At welterweight, Hendricks had been a compact, explosive force. At middleweight, he was undersized and overpowered. The issue was rooted in his diet. Hendricks was open about his love for food. Steaks, fried meals, and large portions were recurring themes. Between camps, he would balloon significantly, creating enormous weight cuts that sapped his energy and left him depleted on fight night. The decline was rapid and devastating. Within a few years of winning the welterweight title, Hendricks was losing fights consistently, missing weight, and eventually retired from the sport entirely. He later opened a restaurant, a fitting epilogue for a fighter whose career was defined as much by his appetite as his abilities. His trajectory is perhaps the most dramatic example of how an unhealthy lifestyle between fights can accelerate a fighter's decline from champion to afterthought. BJ Penn, the prodigy's long decline. BJ Penn is considered one of the most naturally talented fighters in UFC history. The prodigy held titles in 2 weight classes and was known for his silky smooth Brazilian jiu-jitsu and remarkably fast hands. But Penn's later career became a cautionary tale about what happens when motivation, training discipline, and lifestyle choices all deteriorate simultaneously. Penn was famously inconsistent with his training camps. Reports from various corners of the MMA world painted a picture of a fighter who would go through extended periods of inactivity, not training, not dieting, and not maintaining the athletic base that had made him great. His return fights in the later stages of his career were marked by a visibly different physique. The lean, explosive Penn who had dominated at lightweight was gone, replaced by a heavier, slower version who appeared to be competing on reputation rather than preparation. The Hawaiian's lifestyle between fights included long stretches away from the gym, and his conditioning in later bouts was frequently cited as the primary reason for his losses. Penn lost 7 consecutive fights to close out his career, a streak that was painful to watch for anyone who remembered the fighter he once was. Coaches and analysts consistently pointed to his lifestyle between fights as the root cause, suggesting that a more disciplined approach to diet and training could have extended his competitive window by years. Penn's case is a reminder that natural talent, no matter how extraordinary, has an expiration date, and an unhealthy lifestyle accelerates that clock dramatically. Nick Diaz, the party years. Nick Diaz's fighting style was built on an iron cardiovascular engine. The man who ran triathlons for fun and pressured opponents with relentless volume. But between fights, particularly during his extended absences from competition, a different picture emerged. Jake Shields, Diaz's longtime teammate, confirmed that Nick got a little out of control with his drinking habits. In the years since Diaz last fought, there was reason to believe he was partying hard, primarily through Instagram stories, and Shields confirmed that Diaz was hitting the bottle pretty hard. Diaz didn't fight between 2015 and 2021, a 6-year layoff that coincided with what those close to him described as a period of heavy partying and drinking. When he returned to fight Robbie Lawler at UFC 266, the fighter who walked into the cage bore little resemblance to the cardio machine who had terrorized welterweights in Strikeforce. Diaz looked slow, disengaged, and was stopped in the 3rd round. His first TKO loss in a career that stretched back to 2001. He was also caught in post-fight drug tests twice, failing both for marijuana usage. While marijuana use is increasingly normalized in broader society, within the context of competitive athletics, it speaks to a lifestyle that wasn't always aligned with peak performance. The tragedy of Nick Diaz is that at his peak, he was one of the most entertaining and skilled welterweights on the planet. His pressure-fighting, relentless cardio, and fearless attitude made him must-see TV. But the years of partying, drinking, and inactivity slowly eroded the physical tools that made those performances possible. Shields eventually said he believed Diaz had gotten past that part of his life, was no longer out in Vegas all the time, and was back training, suggesting they were seeing the old Nick coming back. But by then, the window had largely closed. Diego Sanchez, the mind, body, and spirit roller coaster. Diego Sanchez's career started with a promise of greatness. Sanchez was chosen as a participant in the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, presented as a young, focused middleweight, with only one goal: to become a UFC champion. And he won a contract with the UFC after defeating fellow finalist Kenny Florian via TKO. He was the original TUF winner, the man who was supposed to set the standard for what the reality show could produce. But Sanchez's lifestyle choices over the course of his career became increasingly erratic and unhealthy. Not just in terms of diet, but in terms of the people he surrounded himself with and the decisions he made about his body. On the show, Sanchez was known for being the oddball of the group, practicing yoga at odd moments and trying to extract energy from a lightning storm. This eccentric streak, while harmless initially, would eventually evolve into something that actively harmed his career and well-being. Sanchez bounced between weight classes throughout his career: middleweight, welterweight, lightweight, and even featherweight, each move accompanied by dramatic physical changes that put enormous strain on his body. After one fight, Dana White revealed that Sanchez had been sick on the eve of the bout and almost had to retire when a test came back indicating he had hepatitis C, although doctors eventually concluded the results were incorrect. The day after the fight, Sanchez had a hole in his thigh the size of a coffee cup and was diagnosed with a staph infection. Then came the Joshua Fabia era. Sanchez's trainer Fabia had disagreements with the commentary team, believed the UFC was aiming cameras at them, and his infamous training sessions, including chasing fighters around with a knife, were widely covered. The relationship with Fabia represented perhaps the most visibly unhealthy phase of any fighter's career in UFC history. It wasn't just about diet or partying, it was about a fighter's entire approach to his health, training, and mental well-being, being actively undermined by the person who was supposed to be helping him. After the release of these videos, Sanchez was released from the UFC, and in May 2021, he announced he had parted ways with Fabia, but the damage had been done. A fighter who had once been one of the most exciting competitors in the sport had seen his career derailed not by an opponent, but by years of questionable lifestyle decisions, physical abuse of his own body through constant weight class changes, and a deeply unhealthy coaching relationship. Sanchez's story is a sobering reminder that unhealthy lifestyle for a fighter isn't always about burgers and beer. Sometimes it's about the ecosystem surrounding the fighter, the choices, the relationships, and the neglect of both physical and mental health that can turn a promising career into a tragedy. The thread that connects all 10 of these fighters is the culture of extreme weight cutting and binge cycling that pervades MMA. A lot of fighters have a very unhealthy relationship with food. If you can't eat what you want for weeks and weeks at a time, then the moment you can, you go wild and eat an obscene amount of obscene food. The endless cycle of weight cutting puts lots of stress on the bodies of fighters and comes with significant health risks. MMA athletes are often under extreme competitive pressure to both gain muscle mass and lose significant amounts of weight in short periods of time, and because of weight class restrictions, fighters often engage in potentially dangerous weight loss behaviors immediately before fights. This creates a vicious cycle: restrict, compete, binge, balloon, restrict again, and the consequences aren't limited to performance inside the cage. According to the International Federation of Muay Thai Associations, rapid weight loss can lead to confusion, decline in memory, depression, and aggression, and over time, repeated cuts can lead to anxiety, depression, and even eating disorders. These aren't abstract risks, they're the lived experiences of the fighters on this list, and dozens of others throughout the sport. In a survey conducted by The Athletic, 61.2% of UFC fighters reported that their career gives them worry about potential long-term brain damage. When you layer unhealthy lifestyle habits on top of the inherent physical dangers of the sport, the head trauma, the joint damage, the cumulative toll of training and competition, the picture becomes deeply concerning. The fighters on this list aren't weak-willed or lazy. Many of them are among the most decorated competitors in the history of the sport. But they are human, and the demands that MMA places on the human body, combined with the financial pressures, the psychological toll of weight cutting, and the culture that normalizes extreme dietary swings, create conditions where unhealthy lifestyles aren't just common, they're almost inevitable. The question isn't whether these fighters should have done better. The question is whether the sport itself needs to do better by them.